A homeless man who died of rat poison in a London warehouse saved the Allied invasion of Europe. He never knew it. He never could. Because by the time he became the most important soldier of the Second World War, he'd been dead for 3 months. This is the bizarre, true story of Operation Mincemeat, a dead man who never existed, a briefcase chained to his wrist, and a lie so perfect it fooled Adolf Hitler himself. April 30th, 1943, the coast of Spain. A fisherman pulls something from the water near the town of Huelva. Not fish, not cargo. A body. A man in British military uniform still attached to a briefcase, chained to his wrist. He has identity papers, a name, a rank, love letters, a photograph of a woman, even a receipt for an engagement ring he apparently never gave her. To every eye that examines him, this is Major William Martin of the Royal Marines, a British officer who fell from a plane somewhere over the Atlantic. There is just one problem. Major William Martin does not exist. He never did. But inside that briefcase, chained to the wrist of a dead man who never lived, was information that would change the course of World War II, if the Germans believed it. If they didn't, the largest seaborne invasion in history would sail directly into a slaughter. Let's go back. By the spring of 1943, the Allies had cleared North Africa. Rommel's forces were finished. The next move was obvious to everyone, including the Germans. Sicily. The island sat like a massive stepping stone between North Africa and the Italian mainland. Geographically, strategically, logistically, it was the only sensible target. Hitler's generals knew it. His admirals knew it. Every map and every German war room pointed to the same conclusion. The Germans had turned Sicily into an absolute fortress. Coastal defenses were fortified. Elite divisions were placed on high alert. Naval forces watched the approaches day and night. And here is what that meant in plain, brutal terms. 160,000 Allied soldiers were scheduled to land on those beaches. If the defenses held, if the Germans were ready and waiting, the casualties would be catastrophic. Not a battle, a massacre. The Allies needed the Germans to look somewhere else. But how do you convince the most dangerous military machine in history to abandon what every instinct tells them is correct? How do you make them believe a lie? A naval intelligence officer named Ewen Montagu had an answer. You don't argue with the enemy's logic. You feed it. You give them intelligence they think they stole. You give them a dead man. Ewen Montagu was not a soldier. He was a lawyer, a king's counsel in peacetime. Sharp, methodical, the kind of mind that understood how people convince themselves of things they want to believe. He worked in naval intelligence under a division so secretive that most of the British military didn't know it existed. Their job was not weapons, not soldiers. Information. Real, false, and everything in between. Montagu's plan was wildly audacious. Plant a dead body on the coast of Spain, dress it as a British officer, attach documents, official, detailed, convincing, that revealed Allied invasion plans. Not for Sicily, for somewhere else entirely. The documents would suggest two things. First, that the real target was Greece. Second, that Sicily was a deliberate feint, a decoy designed to pull German attention away from the true objective. Choosing Spain as the drop point was a calculation of pure genius. Spain was officially neutral, but its intelligence services were deeply compromised by the Nazis. Montagu knew that any documents reaching Spanish authorities would almost certainly be photographed and handed directly to the Abwehr, German military intelligence, within days. The plan was highly risky, but it was approved at the very highest levels. Prime Minister Winston Churchill himself signed off on it. They called it Operation Mincemeat. Now came the hardest part. They needed a corpse, and it had to be a perfect match, or the entire deception would blow up in their faces. The body had to meet very specific requirements. Age, late 30s. Build, consistent with a military officer. Cause of death? Something consistent with drowning or a plane crash into the sea. And crucially, no visible trauma, no wounds that contradicted the story. A Spanish pathologist would examine this man. He had to be completely convincing. What Montagu found after a quiet search through London morgues was Glyndwr Michael, a Welshman, 34 years old. He slept where he could, ate what he found. He had no family who would claim him, No record of service, no one waiting for him anywhere. He had died in a London warehouse, alone, after consuming rat poison that had been mixed into food he scavenged while starving. He died as he had lived, unseen. And now, in the strangest mercy history has ever offered a forgotten man, he would be given a massive purpose he could never have imagined. Montagu's team went to work. They didn't just dress a body, they meticulously built a human life from scratch. They gave him a service record, pay stubs, a bank letter about an overdraft, the kind of detail a forger would never think to include, which made it perfect. A stern note from his father, a receipt for a new shirt, ticket stubs to a London show, £4 and some change in his pockets. 2 love letters from a woman named Pam, written with an emotional intensity that felt unmistakably real, because they were. A young woman who worked in the War Office wrote them herself. She agreed to be Pam. She did not know the full extent of what her words were about to do. A photograph of her, an engagement ring receipt, the ring he'd never gotten the chance to give her. Every piece was deliberate, every detail chosen to withstand a professional interrogation. And then, buried among the personal effects, tucked inside an official dispatch case, as if it were just one document among many, they placed the bait. It was a letter from one senior British general to another, marked personal, marked sensitive. It was a letter that mentioned, in the careful language of high-ranking men who knew correspondence could be intercepted, that the true target was Greece, and that Sicily was merely the cover story. It was written in the exact voice of men who trusted each other but knew to be cautious. It was the ultimate trap, the kind of document that makes an enemy feel incredibly clever for catching it. On April 17, 1943, the body of Glyndwr Michael was sealed inside a canister packed with dry ice. The HMS Seraph, a British submarine, received its orders and slipped beneath the surface of the Atlantic. Before dawn on April 30th, the HMS Seraph surfaced in the dark off the coast of Huelva. The canister was opened. The body, now officially Major William Martin of the Royal Marines, was eased into the cold Atlantic water alongside a rubber life raft to simulate a tragic air crash. The briefcase, chained securely to his wrist, went into the current with him. The submarine submerged and vanished. The tide did the rest. 2 hours later, a local fisherman spotted the floating uniform. What followed was exactly what Montagu had predicted. The body was brought ashore. Spanish authorities were notified. The British vice consul, playing his part in the operation, demanded the documents be returned immediately, with just enough urgency to seem important, but not enough to seem desperate. The Spanish hesitated, and in those critical hours of hesitation, German intelligence swooped in. The documents were taken to a darkroom and photographed, carefully. Every single page, every personal letter, every heartbreaking detail of William Martin's constructed life was copied. Then, the envelopes were resealed and returned to the British, with every appearance that nothing had ever been disturbed. In London, Montagu's team waited. Day 1, nothing. Day 5, still nothing. For 12 days, the same silence. Every morning, Montagu came in. Every morning, no word. The invasion of Sicily was weeks away. The ships were already being loaded. If this hadn't worked, 160,000 men were sailing toward a fully defended coastline. On day 12, the returned briefcase finally arrived in London. Montagu's team examined them under laboratory conditions. They were looking for one thing: evidence of tampering. Evidence the envelope had been opened, the documents read, and the seal carefully replaced. The evidence was there. The Germans had taken the bait. Now the only question was whether they believed it. The photographs of the documents reached Berlin within days. The Abwehr analyzed everything. Forensic experts examined the letters. Handwriting specialists checked the signatures. Intelligence officers cross-referenced the contents against everything they knew about Allied capabilities. Their conclusion? The documents were genuine. The report was immediately sent to the top. It reached Hitler. On May 12, 1943, less than 2 weeks after a dead, homeless Welshman floated ashore on a Spanish beach, Adolf Hitler personally issued orders redirecting German defensive forces. Massive reinforcements dispatched to Greece. Elite panzer divisions repositioned. Naval forces redeployed. The entire German Mediterranean defensive posture restructured around a threat that did not exist. Pointed toward an invasion that was never coming. One intercepted German message read, "The Führer agrees with the assessment that the discovered Anglo-Saxon order confirms the attack is directed mainly at Sardinia and the Peloponnese." He believed it, completely. On July 9, 1943, Allied forces landed on Sicily. The beaches were lightly defended. The German divisions that should have been there were in Greece, waiting for an invasion that never came. Sicily fell to the Allies in just 38 days. The road to Italy, and ultimately to the liberation of Europe, opened because of a dead man with a borrowed name, a fake fiancé, and a letter that was deliberately meant to be stolen. Glyndwr Michael was buried in a cemetery in Huelva, Spain, laid to rest with full military honors under the false name of Major William Martin. For over a decade, his real identity was classified. The British government refused to confirm who the body had actually been. His name did not appear on his own gravestone. It was not until 1996, 53 years after his body was placed in the Atlantic, that Glyndwr Michael was officially identified. His name finally added to the stone in Huelva. A man who died alone, with nothing, unseen by the world. Given in death, the only thing his life never gave him. A name that history would remember. The thousands of young soldiers who successfully landed on those beaches in Sicily, who walked ashore into defenses that had been systematically stripped away, would never know the identity of the person who made their survival possible. A homeless Welshman who died of rat poison in a London warehouse. The most important soldier of the Second World War. The man who never was.